America's #1 news.
Tonight, the sound of war in Afghanistan, bombs going off in the country's second largest city. More than 2/3 of the country is under Taliban control. All eyes now turn to Kabul, with the Taliban just 50 miles away and the frantic evacuation now underway of U.S. Embassy staff. Thousands of troops descending on the airport to try to help get people to safety. And tonight, the U.S. Embassy is ordering staff to destroy sensitive material on site. It's not clear how much longer the Afghan government can hold on there. What responsibility does the U.S. have to help? Frustration is mounting tonight among hospital staffers as COVID cases spike in areas of the country with fewer vaccinated Americans. This comes as booster shots are set to become a reality for some of the most vulnerable. But when might all Americans be eligible? The triple threat tonight: life-threatening heat, severe weather, and a tropical system. Our Rob Marciano tracking it all. And now a new storm could be forming in the Atlantic. What you need to know. They're back. The news you definitely needed this Friday the 13th. The first live murder hornet has been spotted, where it was found, and if officials are worried about more. And skateboarding is helping provide a space for people to be themselves, the welcoming community helping people get through challenging times.
Especially queer people, people that are marginalized because of the color of their skin, people that are marginalized because of their gender or sexuality. Like, these people deserve this space.
Meet some of the new faces of the sport bursting onto the international scene. Friday on my mind. Tonight, as we enter the weekend, how to avoid the Sunday scaries.
The Sunday scaries are eating my joy.
We can't have that happen. Tips to enjoy your weekend and make the most of your work week. Good evening, everyone. I'm Phil Lipoff in for Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us tonight. We begin with that rapidly spiraling situation in Afghanistan. Tonight, the Taliban just 50 miles from Kabul and in control of roughly 2/3 of that country. The sheer speed of the Taliban takeover is forcing the U.S. to take some drastic action. Tonight, thousands of troops are beginning to arrive at the Kabul airport to help evacuate U.S. embassy staff before it may be too late. And the embassy there literally ordering staff to destroy sensitive material on site. Questions remain tonight about the people and the country America is leaving behind. An unnamed female journalist in Afghanistan writing an op-ed in The Guardian saying, we'll quote it for you, "Last week, I was a news journalist. Today, I can't write under my own name or say where I am from or where I am. My whole life has been obliterated in just a few days." Our Ian panel leads us off with the fear of so many and what comes next.
Tonight, with the Taliban swiftly closing in on Kabul, the first of 3,000 American troops are now there.
Troop movements that we mentioned yesterday are happening as we speak. By the end of the weekend, the bulk of the 3,000 that we talked about yesterday will be in place.
The Taliban taking 4 more provincial capitals, now just 50 miles from Kabul. Explosions overnight in Kandahar as the militants gain ground in the second largest city. This video released by the Taliban purporting to show their triumphant entry. The Taliban now controlling more than 2/3 of the country. The Pentagon today asked about the militants' rapid takeover as U.S. troops arrived to evacuate most embassy staff and visa applicants.
We are certainly concerned by the speed with which the Taliban has been moving. Clearly, from their actions, it appears as if they are trying to get Kabul isolated.
But the Pentagon was pressed on why they're not calling this a combat mission.
These soldiers and Marines that are fully kitted out, putting on night vision goggles, landing in Kabul, taking positions at the airport, they're going to a combat zone, are they not?
They're certainly going into harm's way, Lucas, and they will have...
zone?
Lucas, they will have the right of self-defense. They will be armed. And as I said yesterday, and I don't think I could have made it any more clear, that if there is an attack upon our forces, our commanders have now and always have had the right and responsibility to defend themselves.
And tonight, officials still insisting Afghan forces can fight back.
You said the Afghan forces had the advantage. What proof can you offer as the Taliban have taken over now vast majorities of the country and they've now surrounded Kabul?
That the Taliban have moved with the speed with which they have, and that the resistance that they have faced has been insufficient to stop those, to check those advances, does not mean, Lucas, that the advantages aren't still there. You have to use it. You have to be willing to apply it.
Afghans from provinces taken over by the Taliban now fleeing to neighbouring Pakistan. Others fleeing north, setting up encampments in Kabul, speaking of the terrors they've already witnessed. This woman saying the Taliban forced her out of her home in Zarbagum. They killed her sons and married off her daughters-in-law.
Their worst fears being realized tonight. Ian Pannell joins us now. Ian, the Taliban, 50 miles outside of Kabul right now. So what's stopping them from marching straight into the capital?
I mean, probably the arrival of thousands of U.S. Marines is going to slow them down. I mean, the truth is that they haven't actually attacked U.S. troops as they pulled out of the country over the last few months, despite attacking every other target inside Afghanistan. And I think they don't want to provoke a fight with the United States. And therefore, I think they'll probably stop outside Kabul. But I think anyone who would have predicted what's happened over the last few months would have been wrong. So never say never, but I don't think they'll push on Kabul while this evacuation is taking place.
You know this better than most. There are women there, Ian, 20 years old now. It's hard to even think about, who for their entire lives have known a more progressive, we'll say, way of thinking with the U.S. presence there. In prior trips, you've spoken to many of those young women. Do you think they are even ready for the prospect of potential Taliban rule? What are they telling you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. Fundamentally, this goes down to the changes that happen in Afghanistan. The last time we were there, we went to a high school and spoke to some of the young girls there, 16-year-old girls. They've only known life without the Taliban, but their mothers told stories of not being able to go to school, having to wear the burqa, not being allowed out of the home without being accompanied by a brother or a father. All those freedoms, all those rights, everything that your family, my family, take for granted are on the verge of being taken away from them. I mean, they were pleading with me last time, please don't let the Americans go. Now, I understand the argument. America's been there a very long time. It can't solve all the problems. But the truth is that various American administrations did make promises to the country. People built their lives around that. And now they're facing not just going back 20 years, but going back 200.
Seems like a no-win situation. Ian Pannell, thanks so much for the reporting tonight. Let's get to Stephanie Ramos at the White House right now. Stephanie, the president was briefed on the situation in Afghanistan before he headed over to Camp David for the weekend. What are you hearing about that briefing, and how is President Biden responding to the fallout from the withdrawal of U.S. forces?
Well, Phil, we are told that the president was briefed today by his national security team on efforts to safely draw down the civilian footprint in Afghanistan. A source here at the White House tells me that the current plan to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan by August 31st still stands. I'm also told if the Taliban disrupts operations, the U.S. will defend itself forcefully and decisively, but that the White House is taking measures to prevent, detect, and respond to any potential terrorism threats, specifically in Kabul. I'm also told the Taliban taking over Afghanistan was a possibility discussed. This source says the president felt as though he had two choices: indefinite war or draw down our troops after 20 years and continue the U.S. counterterrorism effort. Now, we have not heard from the president on this publicly, but he did tell me earlier this week when I asked him in the East Room here at the White House about his current plan to withdraw U.S. troops, he told me he does not regret his decision and it still stands. Phil.
Stephanie Ramos at the White House tonight. Stephanie, thank you. I'm joined now by Congressman John Katko, top Republican on the House Homeland Security Committee. Congressman, thanks so much for taking the time tonight.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so you and other top House Republicans have put out a statement warning that Afghanistan could once again become the terrorist safe haven that we saw it was before 9/11. If the Taliban continues its advance and is able to capture the capital city of Kabul, which looks imminent, what would the potential consequences be for both Afghanistan and the United States?
I think it's going to be catastrophic for the good people of Afghanistan who relied on us for a way of life, like you reported just before he came on. But also for the United States, which I'm really concerned about, is we're going to go back to a pre-9/11 posture where the Taliban's in control and terrorists are going to be allowed to fester and metastasize within Afghanistan. And of course, we know what happened. The tragedy of 9/11 was directly attributable to allowing that metastasization to happen in Afghanistan. And we're going back to that time. To me, it's incomprehensible that we're doing this.
Well, you've been watching this so closely. President Biden has shown no sign of changing course on the withdrawal of U.S. military presence from Afghanistan. In your view, is there any good option at this point, where we are right now, for the U.S. Getting remaining Americans safely out of the country?
Well, first of all, this is President Biden's version of Saigon. There's no question about it. And, one option that hasn't been discussed much is just think about what happened after the Korean War. We left a military presence there to keep the peace. Strength breeds peace, right? And so we did that there. We did it in Germany. We did it other places around the world. We don't have to be in a war footing in Afghanistan to maintain the peace and to keep the Taliban at bay. But by pulling out wholesale like we're doing, we're creating a vacuum that's only going to be filled with very bad elements who really enjoy and embrace Al-Qaeda type terrorist groups from around the world. So this is a colossally bad mistake, and it's all on the Biden administration.
Okay, so outside of holding hearings and getting briefings on the situation, is there anything Congress can do specifically?
Well, we've passed resolutions we've introduced resolutions trying to stop this. And right now, I think we just have to hope that the president miraculously changes his mind. The fact we have to send 3,000 troops in there just to try and get Americans out of there, it shows how desperate the situation is. And don't forget, right after the American troops get out of there and American citizens get out of there, the breeding ground is going to be once again pre-9/11, and I can't stress that enough, how dangerous that is for the homeland. They've been waiting for this opportunity for 20 years, they being the bad guys. Now they have it, and that is really concerning to me.
Congressman, respectfully, though, as you just put it squarely on President Biden, but as you know, former President Trump's administration negotiated the deal for the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan by May of this year, which President Biden then extended through the summer. So is it fair to call this a speedy withdrawal and, as you did, put the blame fully on President Biden?
Well, President Biden made the ultimate decision. I think it was a mistake for President Trump to decide that as well. And anybody in the Homeland Security arena will tell you that it's a mistake to pull out lock, stock, and barrel. If we kept a defensive posture, if you will, or a base there just to maintain operations, maintain intelligence, and allow our drone activity to really be robust, we could keep everything at bay. And so whoever decided, whether it's President Trump or ultimately President Biden, rests on his shoulders because he's the one who saw it through, then I think it's a mistake.
Finally, Congressman, most Americans support U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan after 20 years there. What do you say to those, though, who argue that another 6 months or, say, a year of Americans there wouldn't change the readiness of the Afghan government and military to hold on to that country? I mean, the U.S. has been training them for years, and they were overrun in a matter of weeks.
Yeah, and that's what makes it all more important to maintain some presence there, in my opinion, to be a deterrent to the bad elements. And I think, yes, everybody wants us out of foreign wars, and we shouldn't be in a war footing in Afghanistan. But maintaining a security presence there, to me, is critically important. And I guarantee you, if Americans are polled, would you want to have a breeding ground for terrorists to strike possibly against the United States? They would resoundingly say no. So I think that changing the posture of this thing by having it a defensive presence in Afghanistan would probably work out just fine. And unfortunately, it seems like it's too late for that. And now we have to really have our antennas up on the Homeland Security front because bad things are going to come from this. There's no question in my mind about it.
All right, Representative John Katko, top Republican on the House Homeland Security Committee. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
All right, so now let's bring in ABC News contributor, retired Colonel Steve Ganyard. Colonel, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Phil.
All right, as we discussed with Congressman Katko, you may have just heard, the U.S. and our NATO allies have been training Afghan forces for years, and yet they were overrun, as we saw, in a matter of weeks. What does that say to you about the success of the U.S. mission there? And was this inevitable no matter when the U.S. left?
Yeah, it says that we failed, and the Afghan people have failed, and the people that we allied ourselves with failed, and the Taliban won. They are in the process of winning, and it looks inevitable like they will win. Phil, think about why we got into Afghanistan, and it was after 9/11 because the Taliban had enabled the Al-Qaeda and bin Laden to train and to plan the 9/11 attacks. So they created a sanctuary. So we went in there going after terrorists, and we decided to stay, despite the lessons that we supposedly learned in Vietnam, to build a country and build a country in our own image. Problem was that we were in the midst of a civil war, and that we essentially ended up picking the wrong side. We allied ourselves with warlords and people that were only marginally better than the Taliban. And after more than 2,000 American dead and more than $2 trillion spent, we are leaving in a rather ignominious way.
Colonel, just last month, President Biden said it was unlikely that the Taliban would overrun the entire country. The question is, and it's an obvious one, did the administration overestimate the ability of the Afghan military and government to hold back the Taliban?
I think what they were expressing, Phil, was a hope. You would think after that much time, after that much money spent, that they would do a better job of standing up to the Taliban. But it's one of these a situation where money cannot buy you commitment. We cannot want it more than they want it. So I think the administration, if you had asked anybody behind closed doors, if you had a beer in your hand, any of them, to include any of the military officers that have worked Afghanistan for years, would have told you that the day we leave, or the day that we signal we're leaving, is the day that the current government in Kabul begins to fall.
So we were thinking about this today. Maybe you can talk to me tactically about this. The Taliban said to be 50 miles from Kabul right now. What happens if they move into the capital and U.S. troops and personnel are still there? Is the Taliban waiting for the U.S. to leave, or could we actually see an armed conflict here?
We could. That is the danger. So we have been negotiating an exit in Qatar. Ambassador Khalilzad has been negotiating nothing really, because he said, we're leaving. Please don't shoot at us on the way out. And there are reports today that said, please spare the embassy. So it's rather disheartening is probably the nicest thing you can say. But in this case, as the Taliban begins to circle Kabul, which they will, it's going to be up to what's left of the Afghan army to defend the capital. Now, if the Taliban owns the rest of the country, it's going to be quite hard for the current leadership of the Afghan government to survive, and for the rest of the city to hold on. And so there may be a siege, but you got to understand this is not like the siege of Stalingrad, where you have armies in uniform and tanks and artillery. The Taliban are insurgents, and it is a civil war, and they look very much like the people that they're fighting or the people that they hope to rule. And so it's not like you can send bombers or AC-130s in there and shoot people up without killing innocent people as well. So it's very, very difficult. They'll be able to infiltrate. They'll be able to sabotage, to create bombings. It's going to be very difficult. To your point, what we're doing here is trying to send in enough U.S. troops to be able to evacuate every U.S. citizen, service member, and diplomat without the embassy being overrun. Remember that there's long memory here of Benghazi, and there's an even longer memory of what happened in the Tehran embassy. And the last thing the Biden administration wants to see is the U.S. embassy burning and U.S. hostages or dead because they failed to protect them as the rest of the country was collapsing.
Right. And still, this is so tough to watch for young women and girls over there in Afghanistan right now. U.S. officials have said for years that the war in Afghanistan can only be resolved through a negotiated settlement, and that it can't be won militarily, as we're seeing now. What have been the obstacles to reaching that kind of settlement with the Taliban? And do you think they were ever negotiating in good faith?
Excuse me. These are people who execute women in public, who institute Sharia law, who take this country back to the Middle Ages, and that is their intent. And negotiating in good faith is not a concept that they understand. So I think we need to understand that once the U.S. signaled we're leaving, the negotiations that were undertaken in Qatar were basically, how do we create some political top cover as we get out of Afghanistan. Again, I'm not passing judgment whether it's a good idea or a bad idea to leave, but once we go into a negotiation and say, here's all our cards on the table, then we really aren't negotiating anything at all. And the only way that the Taliban has been willing to negotiate is at the point of a gun. And if we're not willing to stick around, then the Taliban is eventually going to overrun and retake this country.
Yeah, and it seems sooner than later. Colonel Steve Ganyard, thanks so much for your time and expertise tonight. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Phil.
We turn now to the pandemic and the breaking news late today. The CDC formally signing off on booster shots for the immunocompromised. This comes as southern states are literally at the brink. In Dallas tonight, there are zero ICU beds remaining for children. Doctors there with a heartbreaking message to parents who need to take their kids to get care. And this is a direct quote: "Your child will wait for another child to die." Our Marcus Moore reports tonight from Dallas.
Tonight, the CDC recommending vaccine booster shots for 7 million Americans with weakened immune systems. The goal, to help boost immunity for people who may not have gotten enough protection from their first two Moderna or Pfizer shots. Cancer survivor Jerry McLaughlin got both Pfizer shots, but doctors at the University of Pittsburgh still couldn't detect she had antibodies, so she got a third shot today.
I'm just so relieved, not only for myself, but for the thousands of other patients that will now have the opportunity to get the booster shot.
The immunocompromised, like cancer and transplant patients, face greater risks. One study shows the chance of a vaccinated transplant patient getting a breakthrough infection is 82 times higher, and the risk of hospitalization or death is 485 times higher. Dr. Anthony Fauci telling David they're now studying real-time data on everyone else, tracking how much immunity tapers over time before determining if and when the general population will get boosters.
Dr. Fauci, obviously people at home are going to wonder, is everyone else next?
What we're talking about is making a decision based on real data. And as soon as we find out that we will need to have to booster people, we're going to be ready to do it right away. That's really what the plan is.
The CDC director saying late today the CDC does not recommend additional doses or booster shots for any other population at this time. With 80,000 COVID patients, American hospitals across the South are sounding the alarm. In the last 4 days, Mississippi has seen younger unvaccinated patients die.
We've lost 4 healthy people in their 20s, 2 of whom were pregnant, 0 vaccinated.
San Antonio, Texas, briefly running out of ambulances. Dallas running out of pediatric ICU beds.
In Dallas, we have 0 ICU beds left for children. That means if your child's in a car wreck, or more likely if they have COVID, need an ICU bed, we don't have one. Your child will wait for another child to die. Your child will just not get on the ventilator.
A Texas family is mourning the loss of 12-year-old Rylan Diach. They say he was healthy, but when Rylan got COVID, his mom tells Bluebonnet News he declined quickly, passing away within days. In Corpus Christi, EMS crews are now racing to get more people vaccinated.
You feel it? Yeah, I feel it. It's done.
Okay, that was enough.
We were there as they went door to door giving shots to kids like 13-year-old Derek Leal.
I feel like you should still wear your mask even if you have both of your shots.
Today, Chicago and Los Angeles mandating vaccines for teachers. With schools reopening, more than 10,000 students and teachers across 14 states are now quarantined for exposure to the virus. My child, my choice. But some parents across the country are pushing back against mask rules.
Parents should have the right to govern their own children.
In Broward County, Florida, schools are requiring masks and defying the governor's order. Just days before the new school year, officials report 3 members of the teaching staff died of COVID in just 36 hours.
Marcus Moore joins us now. Marcus, what are the CDC guidelines for when the immunocompromised Americans can get that third shot?
Heard from the CDC director, and the director said that third shot should be given at least 4 weeks after the second, and that it's preferably the same vaccine. And this recommendation is coming 24 hours after Dr. Fauci told us they are studying this for everyone else, looking at that real-time data to see how immunity wanes over time and determine whether or not everyone else at some point will need to get a booster as well. Phil.
Marcus Moore reporting for us tonight. Marcus, thank you. One state we've been reporting all week that has been dealing with a major surge is Mississippi. Joining us tonight is Dr. Ijlal Babar, Director of Pulmonary and Critical Care at Singing River Health System. That's on Mississippi's Gulf Coast. Doctor, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Our own Elwyn Lopez was in Mississippi getting a look at the emergency tent hospital opening in Jackson to deal with this surge. Doctors there told her they feel like, and this is a quote, "we are beyond disaster." Doctor, state officials have said the hospital system in Mississippi is on the brink of failure. Do you agree, first off? And then does your hospital system have the resources it needs, including enough workers?
Certainly we are in a more dire situation than we've been in before, certainly more dire than it was last year, even at its worst. As far as resources are concerned, we are stretched very thin in terms of ventilators. We're also, I think our biggest need right now is nursing staff. We are very short of nursing staff.
Your governor there, Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves, reiterated Wednesday that the state would not have a mask mandate. We know the two best tools for preventing the spread of COVID, vaccines and masks. You're a doctor, you know that. So what do you have to say to those who are critical of mask mandates?
I would say that they look at the evidence. I think there is evidence that masking does cut down transmission. I think that's what they have to go for. I know the governor has stated that, but I also think the governor has given institutions the right to decide if they want to impose masking. For example, some of the school systems have been able to do that, and I think that's really important at this time.
So the surge we're seeing now is largely of the unvaccinated and thus more preventable in theory than the previous surges we've seen. From a personal standpoint, though, how are you doing and how is your team coping with this? It must be exhausting.
It is exhausting. We spend a week in the ICU per intensivist, and by the end of that week, we are completely drained both emotionally and physically. We work in a team with our nurse practitioners, and so are they. But more than anything else, it's our nurses and the respiratory therapists who basically do this day in and day out. And I'm actually more worried about them.
Well, you've done a lot of research into vaccine hesitancy. This leads into the next question. You've said some patients would rather die than get the vaccine. And sadly, we're seeing that happening. Only roughly 35% of Mississippi adults are vaccinated, 35%. Why do you think the messaging from doctors like yourself just isn't getting through?
Phil, I think it's because there are multiple sources where people are choosing to get their information from. I think that social media creates a narrative, and people can choose whichever narrative they want to hear, but I think that is influencing people greatly. I think in many cases it overrides what the physician has to say.
Doctor, what's your message for the rest of the country tonight?
I would say that, don't think that this is just like the previous surges. This is much worse. It's a surge that affects the younger population, and it has devastating consequences. Just a month ago, we didn't know this was going to happen, and now that we're in the midst of it, it's probably the worst that it's ever been.
Oh. Dr. Ijlal Babar, thanks so much for your time tonight. Stay safe, and you and your team, stay strong.
Thank you so much.
And when we come back, the supermarket collapse with people inside, but why authorities say this could have been so much worse. The heartbreaking scenes, the middle school shooting during the third day of school in New Mexico. But up next, our eyes are on the tropics. Our weather team is monitoring not one, but two systems. And if you live in a place dealing with this brutal heat, Rob is standing by with when you may see some relief.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
Finally, the event special. Superstar Whitney Houston. It's a side of Whitney you have not yet seen.
I can tell you that I'm not a person who wants to die.
I'm not the strongest every day, but I'm not the weakest either. And I won't break.
Superstar Whitney Houston.
You think it's easy being a superstar? You have no idea.
Streaming on ABC News Live all weekend.
Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on all the tough questions. Straightforward reporting. No spin, no hype, no bull. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
No matter what happens, the storm eventually ends. And when the storm does end, you want to make sure that you're ready.
Kobe had the best story because he told it himself.
Superstar Kobe Bryant.
Mambas don't die.
Wednesday on ABC. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back. We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The urgent search in Turkey continues tonight for hundreds of missing people who haven't been seen since flash floods ripped through their communities. The torrential rain in parts of that country is so bad it pushed rivers over their banks, created mudslides, leading to countless damaged structures. Sadly, it's believed dozens have also died. Now to the triple threat tonight. A tropical system making its way to the Gulf, severe storms, and on top of that, life-threatening heat. And in the same week, the UN released that dire climate report on the impact humans are having on our planet. We are learning July was the hottest month ever recorded. Our Rob Marciano reports.
Tonight, more than 75 million people sweltering in dangerous heat from the Northeast to the West Coast. This, as NOAA reveals, July 2021 was the planet's hottest month on record. The heat also fueling summer storms, flash flooding in El Paso. A geyser of water erupting from this storm drain Thursday. While in central Illinois, 9 inches of rain flooding homes. People and their pets rescued by boat.
I've lived here for 13 years. I've never seen anything like it.
In the Florida Keys, storms now moving in ahead of Fred. Fred already barreling through the Dominican Republic. With South Florida next in its sights, we met residents like Frank Gomez picking up sandbags, flooding the main threat.
So anytime there's a storm, you got to sandbag up.
I have to do that. Exactly.
Rob Marciano joins us now from Miami. Rob, a busy weekend ahead for sure. Time out if you can for us the storm, the severe weather, and the extreme heat.
All right, Phil, well, this track of Fred has taken a significant shift to the west. That's not necessarily a good thing for the rest of the country because it's going to give it more time over the Gulf of Mexico to strengthen. Right now, it's a mess. It's 200 miles from where I am over the island of Cuba, and it has to get over water to re-strengthen. It will do that tomorrow. Here's the forecast track bringing it over Key West tomorrow afternoon. That's where the tropical storm warnings are. And then staying over the Gulf of Mexico for all of Sunday and through in part of Monday, and then making landfall closer to hurricane strength somewhere along the Florida Panhandle. And this track could easily shift a little bit farther to the west. On the entire peninsula of Florida, though, it'll still be close enough, and on the right side that we'll see heavy rain, maybe even some tornadoes. We've seen some severe weather across the northeast today with a front that's going to bring eventually some cooler air. So another day of record-challenging heat and humidity. Thunderstorms, though, have been pretty significant and will continue to be that way through tonight. And then the heat wave in the northwest, that's not going to relent just yet. We got excessive heat warnings for Medford, Portland, and Seattle. We'll see record-challenging heat there, it looks like, through the weekend. Phil?
Rob, NOAA says July was the Earth's hottest month on record. Knowing that, what numbers stood out to you?
Well, I think the number that stood out to me was the temperature, the land temperature over the northern hemisphere was 2.77 degrees Fahrenheit above average. That's unprecedented, and that broke the old record by 2012. The global temperature was 1 2/3 degree, 1.67 degrees Fahrenheit above average. That's an all-time record. And we've been keeping these numbers for 142 years now. And folks who live in the U.S., like in the central U.S. and the plains, it actually was below average. The Northeast, the East Coast was kind of wetter than average, so it felt a little bit cool. So you may be saying, it wasn't that hot of a July, but globally, it certainly was. And it's another strong signal that our climate, unfortunately, is changing, Phil.
Yeah, a little bit deceiving. Rob Marciano from Miami tonight. Rob, thank you.
You bet.
And still ahead here on Prime, the father and son arrested after allegedly trying to get into Hawaii with fake vaccine cards. You may be surprised at actually how much jail time they could potentially face. The skateboarders breaking barriers and opening up their sport to everyone. And 20 years. And what does America have to show for its troops on the ground in Afghanistan? We're going to take a look by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day, the Edgar Allan Poe Museum wishing everyone a happy Friday the 13th.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
Hug you. Yeah. So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Okay, with America reopening this summer, who will be performing in GMA's first live concert in the park?
Blink 3 times when you feel it kicking in. That's
It's Lord Live, the GMA morning television event. Friday, August 20th. Don't miss Lord on GMA. Sponsored by Caesars Rewards. 24 hours, assault on the Capitol. The ABC News original, exclusively on Hulu. Now streaming. Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on all the tough questions. Straightforward reporting. No spin, no hype, no bull. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
The speed of the Taliban's takeover of much of Afghanistan has been decisive, but the path, the U.S. presence there, has been long and winding. So let's take a look by the numbers. It's been 20 years since U.S. forces first launched airstrikes in Afghanistan after the September 11th attack by al-Qaeda, who was using Afghanistan as their base. The U.S. presence averaged between 15,000 to 25,000 troops until 2009, when violence there escalated. So surges by former Presidents Bush and Obama took U.S. troop levels above above 100,000 by August of 2010, before drawing down over the past decade. According to the Pentagon, military operations in Afghanistan cost about $825 billion through the end of 2020. But the total cost of the war is estimated to be as high as $2 trillion when including all related spending and care for veterans. A total of 2,312 U.S. military personnel have lost their lives in Afghanistan since 2001, though it's been 18 months since the last American combat death in Afghanistan in February of 2020. This spring, President Biden announced he would withdraw approximately 2,500 U.S. forces remaining in Afghanistan by the upcoming 20-year anniversary of 9/11, but most of the withdrawal was completed last month. Since then, we know the Taliban has surged across the country. They've now taken over 17 provincial capitals, half of Afghanistan's 34 total provinces, and they are now in control of 2/3 of that country's territory as they now encircle the capital of Kabul. We still have a ton to get to here on Prime. You ever get that feeling in the pit of your stomach Sunday about what the following work week will bring? Apparently, that feeling has only grown worse during the pandemic. We'll explain. And a legend prepares to say goodbye. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com. World News Now.
And America This Morning.
The best new video.
The breaking news overnight.
Emergency crews called to the town of Surfside.
U.S. airstrikes hitting targets in Iraq and Syria.
The stories people are talking about.
You don't want to shave your legs? Don't. I was going to say.
Oh my. Got it.
And what to expect in the day ahead.
ABC World News Now and America This Morning.
Starting at 2 a.m. Eastern.
Up all night to keep you up to date.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
Finally, the event special. Superstar Whitney Houston. It's a side of Whitney you have not yet seen.
I can tell you that I'm not a person who wants to die. I'm not the strongest every day, but I'm not the weakest either. And I won't break.
Superstar Whitney Houston.
You think it's easy being a superstar? You have no idea.
Streaming on ABC News Live all weekend.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run with.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
Next week, what teachers say.
Children need structure.
About the school year ahead, every parent should hear.
Please do not be afraid to ask for help.
Plus, Melissa McCarthy live and Nicole Kidman on
Good Morning America. I like to say that.
Just 2.5 weeks before the U.S. troop withdrawal from Afghanistan is due to end, the country's security situation is unraveling. Overnight, new videos showing aerial bombs exploding in Kandahar.
3,000 fresh U.S. troops are rushing to Kabul in a temporary deployment to speed evacuation flights for some American diplomats and thousands of Afghans from that country's capital.
This is a specific, narrowly focused, tailored mission to help with the safe, secure movement of the reduction of civilian personnel.
The Taliban rapidly seizing control of at least 15 provincial capitals in 1 week and 3 major cities in the last 24 hours. Right now, the Taliban controls 2/3 of the country. Those gains leaving families displaced. Videos showing many flooding the Pakistan border Friday, trying to escape.
Well, rescue crews had to dig through the rubble of a building collapse to rescue several people in Las Vegas. The partial collapse happened in the front of a supermarket around 6 o'clock this morning. When first responders arrived, they were told 4 people were trapped in the rubble. All 4 were pulled out safely. As for the cause of the collapse, fire officials still do not know.
Not very common. Doesn't happen very often. I don't know. Wind can cause things to collapse. I don't know if the wind was strong enough, but it's an older building, so who knows.
Well, none of the people trapped in the rubble suffered life-threatening injuries, although one victim did have to be hospitalized.
A small town in southwestern England rattled by gun violence. The shooting in Plymouth leaving 5 people dead before the suspect turned the gun on himself.
Tragic incidents like these are rare in the UK.
Obviously, it's quite close to home, which is quite frightening. So, yeah, scary.
It's not really what you think to hear down in Plymouth, is it, really? It's just not the ordinary.
School and church in the neighborhood have opened up for those affected by the attack. Police have determined it was not terror-related.
A father and son have been busted for trying to use fake vaccine cards at a Hawaii airport after traveling from the mainland. Trevor and Norbert Chung were arrested after authorities received a tip from someone in the community. They're accused of violating the governor's emergency proclamation, which includes strict COVID travel rules. People caught flouting the rules could face a $5,000 fine and up to a year in prison. Investigators are working to learn where the vaccine cards came from.
They're back. The first sighting of a murder hornet in the U.S. this year. Washington State releasing this photo of the large murder hornet native to Asia attacking a wasp nest. State officials asking residents to keep an eye out for the hornets and report any sightings to the Washington State Department of Agriculture. Murder hornets were first spotted in Washington State in 2019. The hornets are a major threat to our food supply. Experts fearing they could wipe out the honeybee population that pollinates our crops, and a danger to animals and humans. They kill up to 50 people a year in Japan.
Legendary crooner Tony Bennett officially retired from the stage at the age of 95. This comes just a week after he performed 2 sold-out shows at Radio City Music Hall with Lady Gaga. Bennett's son, Danny, says doctor's orders forced his father to cancel the rest of his fall 2021 tour dates. Danny Bennett says singing isn't the issue. He says there's a concern about his dad's physical health and a possible fall. Bennett has suffered from Alzheimer's disease since 2016.
Now an all too familiar scene, unfortunately. Police responding to a deadly middle school shooting, this time in Albuquerque. The students just back to school for 3 days. Zareen Shah has the details.
Tonight, tragedy as gunshots ring out at an Albuquerque middle school, killing 1 student.
Washington Middle School.
Just before 12:30, Albuquerque police responding to shots fired as students were on their lunch break outside the school building. That's when the suspect pulled out a gun and began firing several shots.
We have 1 juvenile, 2 gunshot wounds.
The student who shot has unfortunately passed away at this time.
This was just the 3rd day of school for students at Washington Middle School. As shots rang out, students running for their lives, sheltering in place for hours. Police quickly arriving on scene and arresting the suspect.
An APS police officer who was on scene and outside when the shooting occurred was able to immediately rush over, de-escalate the situation, and take the offender into custody with no further violence.
Terrified parents lining up outside the school, reunited with their children. Officials say the victim and the suspect were both just 13-year-old boys. Tonight, they're investigating what led up to this horrific shooting. Phil?
All right, thank you. Now more to the follow from New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's bombshell resignation. The governor is set to leave office on August 25th, and today the state assembly announced it will not conduct its impeachment investigation, which included the 11 women accusing him of sexual harassment. The Speaker of the state assembly saying he has been advised the legislature may not have the constitutional authority to remove an elected official who is no longer in office. The committees conducting the investigation, we're told, will turn over all relevant investigatory evidence to authorities. And then there is this tonight, a new group of skateboarders shredding the norms of their sport. They've inspired a movement that celebrates diversity and dreamers inside the skateboarding community. ABC's Ashin Singh has this story.
We're here at Substance Skate Park in Bushwick, Brooklyn, where this crew feels empowered to try things they've never done before, even wiping out, with friends to help them up when they do. Alana T is trying to land a trick called the rock and roll. This is what the new face of skateboarding looks like.
New York City has a lot of skaters of different backgrounds and identities that are not traditionally represented in skateboarding.
They're establishing inclusive spaces where non-binary and trans skaters won't feel like outsiders, fighting to make sure anyone who wants to skate can. Since the start of the pandemic, it's blown up across the country. In June 2020, sales of skateboarding equipment increased by 118% compared to the same period in 2019. It's been front and center on the largest athletic stage in the world, the Tokyo Olympics, the first time skateboarding has been included in the games, with winners as young as 13, like Momiji Nishia, who took home gold for Japan, but also for misgendering American non-binary skater Alana Smith, who proudly had their pronouns, they, them, scribbled on their deck. And in Brownsville, Brooklyn, at the Sun-Baked Rudd Skate Park, this crew knows how important that kind of representation is. I'm about to get on board with Shawnee, Anna, and Corey, founders of the NYC-based collective Pansy Skate.
We want to make sure that people feel safe because they deserve that, especially queer people, people that are marginalized because of the color of their skin, people that are marginalized because of their gender or sexuality. Like, these people deserve this space.
Talk to me a little bit about, this journey that you've been on and actually coming out and how skating has helped you.
I didn't really know myself as well. I was living in Wisconsin in like a pretty small town. At that point in my life, I didn't really know I was trans yet either, or like a genderqueer person. I think that's a part of like the queer experience, is like figuring out who you are. But then I got into skating and I met these people and I was like, oh, this is like my people. Like, I very much believe in chosen family, and like that's my chosen family. And at the end of the day, like, you know that there's going to be a place for you.
Along with providing a safe space for skaters, Pansy hosts community meetups.
We did a Juneteenth event with Quell Magazine and They Skate, which is another queer skateboarding organization, and we raised money for queer Black organizations, and so whatever way that we can give back to that community, we felt like that was the best way that we could do it.
And it's amazing to see faces in person, to talk to them and just be like, we're here for you. And we always do a little roundup at the beginning to just be like, if you ever need to talk to us about anything. We all just had a great time celebrating life and skating.
And now, I guess it's my turn.
The guys at Pansy are obviously pros, but here at Nightline, it is safety first, so I'm gonna get suited up before they teach me some tricks. All right, I'm ready to ollie.
Oh. Yep. And just snap it. Yeah.
All at the same time.
Yeah.
Nope, still jumping on the board, man. No.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go.
All right, we're getting warm.
You're snapping.
Yeah. So you're pushing your weight all the way back with the back foot, but then the front foot slides up, and then that causes the board to come up into the air.
That was sweet. So those first few weeks of you guys kind of getting on the board, I mean, what was this like? Were you able to do tricks right away?
Of course not. No.
But when you skate
months.
8 hours a day, 7 days a week, especially together, we were vibing off each other a lot. So I think we learned kind of fast.
Why is it so important for you guys to make a mission out of this and make an organization out of this? Because at the end of the day, isn't it just skating?
I personally think that, like, in my experience of skating, that it helps me to, like, come back into myself. And even if I'm falling, a lot of times that, like, knocks me back into my body and helps me to, like, re-assimilate with myself and, like, my thoughts. You're like, okay, I'm back at it, let's go.
Kai and Shab can also tell you what it's like to fall and then get up again. They're the co-founders of They Skate, bringing LGBTQ+ skaters to the front.
We're always the plus one and we don't want to be tacked on, so I want to tack on an ally. Welcome to my world.
Shab and Kai left their last skate group after feeling their identities were being used.
And I started having question marks pop in my head of, like, am I here because I'm being tokenized? Do they understand what it is to be a black skater, a non-binary skater, a trans skater?
Let's put you at the front. And now let's take photos with you everywhere to make it look like we're diverse and make it look like we're inclusive.
It's not always roses when you're skating. It's not always comfortable. There is harassment.
For Kai and Shab, it's about expressing their style with a bonus of a little bit of onboard bonding.
This isn't just skating. This is what's making us happy. We might look angry, we might be sweating, we might be screaming because we keep falling, but we're happy. I promise, we're happy.
Back at Substance Skate Park, the moment of truth for Alana.
And you realize, like, oh my God, I'm doing the thing that I thought I couldn't do. It's really, like, given me confidence in myself and how I approach other things in life that are scary, but that I know deep down I can do.
A salute against the setting sun. And the satisfaction of knowing they're part of a community that not only accepts them, but rejoices when they land some sweet moves.
There you go. Yes.
Inclusivity, a new trend. Nice to see. When we come back, ever have a case of the Sunday scaries? Stay with us.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, the hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Welcome back, everyone. I know a lot of us can relate to this. Ever get that feeling of dread before starting a new work week? Not on Saturday, specifically on Sunday. Now a new report shows the Sunday scaries are at an all-time high. ABC's Rebecca Jarvis has more on what's behind it and how to beat it.
Many Americans may be living for the weekend, but a new report says the fun ends Sunday when lots of us start worrying about the work week ahead.
Everyone in my house
gets bummed out about Mondays.
That Sunday anxiety is known as the Sunday scaries, and a new report from LinkedIn reveals the scaries are at an all-time high.
The Sunday scaries are eating my joy.
The report revealing that 66% of professionals say they experience Sunday scaries, and 41% say the pandemic has caused them or made them worse.
Now more than ever, it's difficult for Americans to determine what their Mondays are going to be like. We have no idea when regulations are going to change, when our responsibilities are going to change.
This Maryland mom of two has a major case of the Sunday scaries.
Sunday nights in my house tend to look a little bit like everyone's in mourning or dreading what's coming the next day.
Baker says the last year and a half has made Sundays more stressful for her family.
There's a lot more things on my to-do list every week as far as making sure that, you know, when my kids are in school, that they have the PPE that they need, or that my husband has it when he's going into work, keeping an eye on COVID numbers in our area. It's a lot.
So how can we enter the week calmly?
Things like meditation, slow journaling, and even perhaps a soothing Sunday playlist can help. Sunday scaries usually feels like anxiety, restlessness, and irritation. So outdoor activities, intentional movement, and hanging out with friends can help that as well.
Now I can put a name to how I was feeling. Rebecca, thank you. Before we go tonight, the image of the day. Take a look. A man in Xinjiang, China, watches the Perseid meteor shower. The celestial light show has been taking place around the world these last few days. Whether or not you are in a place where you can see the stars this weekend, do try to take a moment to enjoy our beautiful planet. That's our show for this hour. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us.